Seattle's mayor is declining further comment about a series of viral moments that have overshadowed any sort of policy discussion and raised new concerns about her leadership.
And today, we need to talk about a moment that happened in Seattle last month that almost nobody is paying attention to. You should be paying attention to it because it tells you everything about what is happening to one of the most important cities in America right now. Picture this. You are a self-described Democratic socialist who just became mayor of a major American city. You beat the incumbent by less than 0.75%, the narrowest margin in more than a century. You take office. You propose taxing the rich. You boycott Starbucks. You tell anyone who will listen that the wealthy leaving your state is, quote, super overblown. And then someone in the audience asks if you are worried. And you just laugh, wave your hand, and say bye. That was Katie Wilson, mayor of Seattle, April 14, 2026, at a forum at Seattle University. On camera. And within days of that moment, the Washington Post editorial board called her arrogant. Fox Business ran it on a loop. Economists started asking if she actually understood what was already happening to the city she was running. Because here is what she apparently missed. The same week, she was waving goodbye to Millionaires, a baking company with 120 workers in a suburb 15 miles south of her office filed paperwork to shut the whole operation down. Not because the business was failing, because the math stopped working in Washington. And those 120 people are losing their jobs in August. If that hits different than the usual corporate exodus headlines, it should. Because this is not Goldman Sachs. It is not a hedge fund. It is not a billionaire with a jet and 3 houses making a tax play. This is a food manufacturing plant. The kind of place where production workers and sanitation crews and quality assurance staff show up every single morning and make things people eat. That is the story we are covering today. And before we get into it, if you want more deep dives into stories that actually affect your life, hit that subscribe button now and the notification bell so you do not miss what is coming next. Let us get into it. So let us start with Rise Baking Company, because if you have not heard of them, that is exactly the point. Rise Baking is headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota. They run roughly 20 manufacturing facilities across North America. They employ about 3,800 people. They make cakes, cookies, muffins, pies, brownies, bread, the kind of baked goods that end up in grocery store bakery cases, convenience stores, and food service operations across the country. This is not a niche artisan operation. This is a serious national-scale food manufacturer, owned since November 2024 by 2 private equity firms, Platinum Equity and Butterfly. Their Kent, Washington facility sits in the industrial corridor of the Green River Valley, about 15 miles south of Seattle. It has been there for years. 120 workers, production rotators, packaging staff, sanitation workers, mixers, quality assurance, warehouse, maintenance. Real working-class jobs. The kind that anchor industrial communities for decades. Then, on March 12, 2026, Rise Baking issued a press release. The title of that release, Rise Baking Company optimizes manufacturing footprint to expand production capacity. Corporate language. So here is what it actually means. Every single one of those 120 workers is getting laid off. Separations begin August 7th. The company filed the required WARN Act notice with Washington state agencies in Olympia. Those jobs are gone. But here is the part that should stop you cold. Rise Baking is not retreating. They are expanding. Just not in Washington. They are adding roughly 115,000 square feet of new manufacturing space to their facility in Pleasant View, Utah, nearly doubling that campus, creating 170 new jobs there, building it out as the company's primary hub for pie production. They are not shutting down, they are growing. Washington just does not get to be part of it. Now here is the timing that makes this more than just a business story. March 12, 2026. The same day Rise Baking filed that WARN Act notice and announced the Kent closure, the Washington State Senate gave final approval to Senate Bill 5346. The Millionaire's Tax. A 9.9% income tax on every dollar of household income above $1 million per year. Governor Bob Ferguson signed it into law on March 30th. And just like that, Washington, a state that had rejected income taxes 10 separate times since 1934, officially had won. The entire economic identity of this state was built in part around not having a personal income tax. That is now over. Rise Baking, when asked directly by reporters why they chose to leave Kent specifically, declined to answer. The official framing stays with consolidation and efficiency. So let us be honest about what we can and cannot say. Rise Baking did not publicly cite Washington's taxes as the reason they are leaving. What we can say is this. They announced their departure from Washington on the exact day the state legislature voted to impose a brand new income tax. And they are expanding, not contracting, in Utah, a state with a flat 4.5% corporate income tax and no estate tax. You follow the money from here. Because what is happening to Rise Baking is not happening in a vacuum. It is the latest data point in a trend that is now undeniable. Let us follow the money. The capital gains tax climbed to 9.9% on gains above $1 million. The estate tax top rate reached 35% on estates over $9 million. Gas taxes went up 6 cents per gallon. Sales taxes expanded to cover IT services, advertising, and staffing. Combined, the 2025 tax package alone was projected to generate $9 billion over 4 years. The millionaire's income tax is the latest addition to that stack. And the Tax Foundation ran the numbers on what all of this means for someone working in Seattle. Their findings should concern everyone in that city. Under the new law, Seattle now has the highest combined top marginal rate on wage income in the entire country, 18%. Higher than California, higher than New York, highest in the nation. And what does the mayor of Seattle say about that? She says bye. Now here is where it gets real. Because Katie Wilson is not just waving goodbye to abstract millionaires. She is waving goodbye to what is actually happening to the businesses and workers in her own city. The Association of Washington Business surveyed employers this spring. A year ago, 9% said they were considering leaving Washington. By the most recent survey, 24%. Nearly a quarter of Washington employers are actively thinking about moving their business to another state. And 55% of business leaders are considering moving their personal residence. In Spokane County, which borders Idaho, that number is 67%. And it is not just the businesses themselves. Downtown Seattle's office vacancy rate hit 34.7% in the fourth quarter of 2025. Seattle went from ranking first in CNBC's top states for business in 2017 to 14th by 2025. On the specific measure of cost of doing business, Washington ranks 48th out of 50 states. The worst public health crisis in a century forced small business owners in Seattle to physically lock their doors by government order. And a survey of 136 independent small businesses conducted this past winter, cafes, restaurants, boutiques, salons, found that 67% of them reported being under more financial stress right now than they were during COVID. 2/3 more stress than COVID. Let that sit for a second. And the mayor's response is to look for new taxes on big business and the wealthy to close a $40 million city budget gap. Her words at a community forum, not paraphrased. She told the crowd her team was, quote, very hard at work looking for progressive revenue options, taxing the rich, taxing big business. So let us talk about the human cost of all this. Because the Rise Baking closure is not an abstraction. It is 120 people showing up to a facility in Kent, Washington, doing real work and finding out that by August their jobs will no longer exist in this state. Production rotators, packaging staff, sanitation workers, mixers. These are not people who can relocate to Pleasant View, Utah on a moment's notice. They are working people who built their lives around the assumption that a stable industrial employer would stay put. And the ripple effect does not stop with them. When a plant closes, the visible loss is the jobs. The invisible damage runs deeper. The lunch spots near the facility lose their regulars. The suppliers who depended on that plant lose a customer. The dairy farmers and ingredient producers who fed that operation now face an uncertain market. And every business looking for a place to set up manufacturing looks at what happened in Kent, looks at Washington's cost structure, and quietly goes somewhere else. The damage compounds. And the people who can least afford to absorb it end up carrying the most of it. Now, let us go back to the mayor. Because Katie Wilson's by moment was not a slip, it was a pattern. The day after she won the mayoral election in November 2025, she joined a Starbucks protest picket line. Seattle's largest private employer. She told the crowd she was proud to say loud and clear that she was not buying Starbucks, and they should not either. Months later, Howard Schultz, the man who built Starbucks from a single store at Pike Place Market, announced he was leaving Seattle for a $44 million penthouse in Miami. Same day, the millionaire's tax passed. Then Starbucks announced it was opening a corporate hub in Nashville. $100 million investment. 2,000 jobs. Tennessee has no income tax. Wilson later acknowledged the Starbucks boycott had done more harm than good. But the company is still expanding in Tennessee, not Washington. The mayor of Seattle called for a boycott of Seattle's most iconic company, then had to walk it back, while that company redirected $100 million and 2,000 jobs to another state. The Washington Post editorial board, not exactly a conservative publication, used the word arrogant to describe Wilson's handling of the economic warning signs her city is sending. In Seattle, a $140 million structural deficit is being answered with a search for more ways to tax whoever has not left yet. Here is why Utah is winning this. It is not luck. It is not geography. It is a flat 4.5% corporate income tax and a flat 4.5% individual income tax. No estate tax. No gross receipts tax. U.S. News and World Report has ranked Utah the #1 best state in the country for 3 consecutive years. Utah's real GDP grew at 4.5% in 2024. Unemployment sat at 3.1%. The Ogden metro area, where Pleasant View is located, ranks among the top 3 best-performing large cities in the United States. And Rise Baking is going to hire 170 people there. Utah is not doing anything dramatic. It is not giving away the store. It is just offering a stable, predictable tax environment with competitive rates and a government that treats business investment as something worth keeping. That is the entire pitch. And companies are taking it. Here is what the pattern looks like when you zoom all the way out. Because this is not new. Taxes and regulatory costs rise. Businesses and high earners start reducing their footprint. The tax-based policy was designed to collect from start shrinking. Revenue comes in short of projections, and the response is another round of increases, which pushes more businesses and earners out the door, which grows the gap again. That is not a policy disagreement. That is a doom loop. And anyone who has watched what happened to Illinois over the last decade, or California's manufacturing sector, or what New York is going through right now, knows exactly where it leads. Washington built one of the most impressive concentrations of economic talent in the country. Amazon, Microsoft, Boeing, Starbucks. That concentration grew in an environment where the absence of a personal income tax was a genuine competitive advantage. That advantage is now gone. The millionaire's tax is signed into law. The business and occupation surcharges are already in effect. The capital gains and estate tax increases are already in effect. And a quarter of Washington employers are actively thinking about following Rise Baking out the door. So let us come back to where we started. A self-described Democratic Socialist takes the mayor's office in Seattle by less than 0.75%. Boycott Starbucks. Watches Starbucks announce 2,000 jobs are going to Tennessee. Gets asked about millionaires leaving Washington. And she laughs, waves, and says bye. And 15 miles from her office, 120 workers in a baking plant learn their jobs end in August. Not because the company is struggling, because the math stopped working in this state. Here is the bottom line. Rise Baking did not leave Seattle because of one bad quarter or one bad policy. They left because of the accumulated weight of a tax environment that made staying in Washington harder than building something new in Utah from the ground up. And the mayor's response is to call the concern overblown, to wave, and to get back to work figuring out how to raise taxes on whoever is left. This is not really about one baking company or one mayor. It is about what happens when the people running a city decide the answer to every fiscal problem is to squeeze harder on the exact people and businesses who fund the city in the first place. The math does not care about progressive intentions. It does not care about what is politically popular. It follows the numbers. And right now, the numbers are following Utah. I want to hear from you. Are you, in Washington State, watching this happen from the inside? Are you a small business owner doing the math right now on whether it still makes sense to stay? Drop it in the comments because these conversations matter. And if this video gave you something to think about, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you do not miss what is coming next. Stay informed. Stay sharp. Never stop following the money.